Some houses hold secrets. Some doors, once closed, should never be opened. For years, this house was just another home, just another stop on a quiet street in Kansas City. But inside, one monster was conducting horrifying experiments on the human body and keeping meticulous records of every scream. He wasn't a shadow lurking in alleyways. He wasn't a drifter. He was a respected business owner, a man who blended into society so well. No one suspected the horrors happening right inside his home. Yet another young man has disappeared. Police have no leads, no witnesses, just another name added to a growing list.
For years, Robert Berdella tortured, experimented on, and murdered 6 known young men. He kept meticulous records. He took photographs. He saw himself not as a killer, but as a scientist. And in 1988, one of his captives escaped, revealing the nightmare inside 4315 Charlotte Street. This is the terrifying story of the Butcher of Kansas City. On April 2nd, 1988, a young man named Christopher Bryson saw his chance. Naked, weak, but fueled by sheer terror, he threw himself out of a second-story window and crashed onto the hard pavement below. Bryson stumbles to a neighbor's house, pounding on the door. With a dog collar still around his neck and a broken wrist, Bryson begged for help. What he told the police would unravel one of the most horrific serial torture cases in history. "There's a man outside. He's hurt. He says someone tried to kill him," the female caller said. "Officer, who did this to you?" Christopher's lips tremble. He can barely say it aloud. Christopher whispers, "Bob Berdella." What they found inside would scar them forever. The police step into the dimly lit house. The air is thick, stale. Random junk clutters the floor, old newspapers, dirty dishes, but then they see it. A mattress stained with blood. Chains bolted to the wall. A camera. Piles of Polaroids. A wooden chair with wrist and ankle restraints. The detective's hand trembles as he picks up a notebook. The pages are filled with handwritten notes. Cold, clinical, horrifying. Day 1. Administered electric shocks. Moderate pain response. Day 2. Injected drain cleaner into voice box. Response minimal. Day 4. Eyes swollen shut. Body beginning to shut down. The detective closes the journal, his face pale. He knows this is not the work of an impulsive killer. This is organized, calculated, scientific, period. They found thousands of photographs, torture logs, a diary of death, and a freezer full of body parts. Robert Berdella was never a normal child. He was a loner, bullied for his thick glasses and quiet demeanor. But behind those glasses was something far more sinister, an obsession with control. He didn't just study biology. He dissected animals, kept journals. He was fascinated with pain. And when he moved to Kansas City in the 1970s, he became a respected businessman, selling oddities at the Westport flea market. But Robert Berdella wasn't just selling antiques. He was building something much darker, a private laboratory and a torture chamber. Between 1984 and 1988, young men started vanishing. Drifters, runaways, people no one would miss. Berdella lured them in with food, drugs, and false promises. Once inside, they never left. 1984. A young man named Jerry Howell accepts a ride from Berdella. He smiles, unaware of what's about to happen. Berdella kept Jerry alive for 2 days. He tested electroshock therapy. He injected drain cleaner into his vocal cords. He took notes on every reaction. He took notes on everything, every scream, every reaction. He injected drain cleaner into their throats to silence them, electric shocks, needles under fingernails. He wanted to see how much the human body could endure. He photographed his victims at every stage of their suffering. Their agony was his research. This wasn't just murder. This was experimentation on human lives. With overwhelming evidence against him, Berdella confessed. But he struck a deal. Life in prison instead of the death penalty. He admitted to 6 murders. But how many more never made it onto paper? Some believe Berdella's real victim count is much higher. There are missing persons cases from the 70s and 80s that remain unsolved. And then, just 4 years later, in 1992, Berdella died suddenly in prison. A heart attack. No final words, no remorse. And with him, the secrets of the unknown victims he never confessed to. Robert Berdella was not a typical serial killer. He didn't kill for pleasure. He killed for knowledge. To him, human suffering was just a science experiment, detectives said. Berdella's case changed the way we look at serial predators. He wasn't insane. He wasn't out of control. He was meticulous, methodical, and pure evil. How many more victims? Kansas City will never forget the butcher. But the real question remains. How many others like him are still out there, watching, studying, waiting? For the victims' families, it wasn't justice. It was just the end of a nightmare. Kansas City today, the house is gone, but the horror remains. Robert Berdella died in 1992. But the true horror? We'll never know how many victims never made it onto paper. A butcher with a diary, a scientist of suffering, and a reminder that monsters don't hide in the dark. They live next door. Subscribe for more chilling true crime.